Hey everyone, welcome to Latin Excellence in Iowa. Today you're going to find me with Cristobal Francisquez. He is a master's student at the University of South Dakota in English as a second language. He is a latte artist extraordinaire, and he is a CrossFit coach, my coach actually. Thank you for being with me, Cristobal.
Hey, thanks for having me here today, Victor.
Yeah, and happy Indigenous Peoples Day. I know that official day was on Monday, but honestly, when you're in the United States of America, every single day is Indigenous Peoples Day, or any country in the Americas to be exact. Cristobal,
hmm
could you please tell me where your family's from and why Indigenous Peoples Day is so important to you?
yes. So my both my parents are from a small town in Guatemala. Specifically, it's a small town called Santa Eulalia. It's in the state of Huehuetenango, which is in like the northwest part of Guatemala. It touches almost like the border of like I think it's like Chiapas. If my geography is right, we're only about I think 5 6 hours away from the border of Mexico. And why is indigenous peoples important to me? Well, because I was raised, with like a Maya, indigenous background. Both my parents, they both speak their dialecto, their Mayan dialects per se, and so I was kind of, I was raised into having, these distinct, back, culture or distinct traditions, more or less. A little bit different than my other peers, where most of them were like Mexican American, or even other, other friends that were like from other like Hispanic Latino countries like El Salvador and Mexico. So I had this kind of like a distinct, side of me that I was more or less trying to find out. So, but yeah, so both my parents speak. It's a dialecto called Maya Canjobal, which is spoken in that region, a little bit in Mexico, and outside of that area, it's spoken in like the LA area, Atlanta, Georgia, Miami, Florida, in Omaha, Nebraska, Sioux City, Iowa, and a few other places, like in Colorado as well. So,
There's so much power in language, I think, and I feel like
mhm.
even like ESL, right? You're giving people the power of being bilingual, trilingual, and multilingual, and I think that's really
Uh-huh.
cool that and even in these cities, your language persists,
Exactly.
and that's cool, and the identity goes along with it.
Definitely.
That Yeah, thank you for sharing that. How have you felt as an Indigenous Latinx person or within the Latinx community at large?
How have I felt? I think it was something that I kind of struggled with, especially during high school, or rather middle school, going into high school. I was dealing with like a like two different kinds of identities, more or less. I was more on one side. I was considered, indigenous. I was considered, someone that was more or less you don't really see much in terms of like like your race, and then there's the other side of me, which was speaking, being a Spanish speaker, being like Latinx and Hispanic. Was definitely challenging for me to kind of figure out who I was and why, why I was here, who I actually belonged to in terms of like which group. I think until I was in when I first started learning more about myself, in starting at my early years at WITS, and then eventually when I transferred to USD, was when I was actually able to really figure out who I was and my true identity per se.
Yeah, I think language is complex, and so is identity. I feel like when you move within these spaces, you're gonna have to find like where you fit in the most, what people accept the most, and unfortunately, a lot of the Latinx community still has a lot more things to learn about
hmm
and
Definitely.
grow into. I feel like.
Yeah, well, like I like being in first generation, you don't really have like a backup or or actually like a like a plan, more or less, of what you wanted to do. Like obviously, I
Mhm.
think the end goal was to go to college, because obviously that's everyone's kind of goal, especially for first generation family. My parents have always talked about us, going to college someday, and
Mhm.
so I think, during high school, I started pretty well in middle school, but kind of going into
Yeah.
high school, I kind of lost that passion of, of excelling in academics. And so my grades were so well, I kind of started losing focus on school. And so I think I was around like the last, I think it was junior and senior when I actually was able to like kind of get back on track and to hopefully get somewhere, in terms of where I wanted to go. So by the time I graduated, I had taken a few like courses, like the courses that you would take through school through high school that would count as college credit. And then from there, I started at WITS, and again, like that first year was kind of hard just because I didn't have any guidance or anyone that I can look up to that could help me, navigate through these, through this new challenge, which is college. And so that first year or so was actually very difficult, and I didn't do so well, and I wasn't really in a really good space, you could say, both like mentally and emotionally, through school. So it wasn't until came across Trio that I was actually able to, get on track again and find my path, find where I needed to be. So thanks to, Trio, they were actually able to help me guide me in the right path, and navigate me through like the next, phase, which was, transferring to a 4-year college.
Yeah, shout out to Trio Student Support Services, honestly. And today we have Trang and Alejandra, who are both really essential to student success at WIT, and I definitely recommend using them as well. And I'm glad that they were able to help you to transfer. You did
Hmm.
transfer to the University of South Dakota. Could you
Hmm.
please tell us about that experience, why you chose the University of South Dakota?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just it more or less started back in when I was at WIT. I went through the college campus visits. I mean, I started at University of Iowa, Iowa State. I even checked out like Briar Cliff at one point, and then eventually kind of more or less came down to Wayne State and the University of Iowa, or sorry, University of South Dakota. The reason why I chose USD was I think because it was really close to home, and it was affordable. I think that was the biggest thing, was it was affordable, and it was a state school, but in a small town, and um, I fell in love with the town as soon as I went in there with my family one day, and I figured, or I realized like this is where I want to go. So with more or less with the help of Trio, they were able to help me kind of narrow the search to use Deem, mainly because it was cheap and it was affordable. It was easy to get around. It wasn't as intimidating as like some of the other universities. And I mean, I think the classes are enough where like, it was big but small enough where you could still get a good education and obviously be close to home. So
Yeah, I think that's very cool. And I think that's what, when people ask about what the size of the school impacts, it's exactly that. Sometimes it
mhm,
can be less intimidating going into a smaller college or university because there's less people, right? And
exactly.
you'll have more one-on-one attention. And that's what
Mhm,
it really comes down to, your strengths
exactly.
and kind of your needs at that time.
Mhm.
What did you major in at the University of South Dakota?
I when I first transferred, I was my minor major actually was in history education, but I kind of soon found out that that wasn't really my thing. I think I struggled with history mainly because of the extensive research that goes with history, and like the long papers and like the Chicago format wasn't really my thing, and I never actually made it to where I had to go into student teaching and finish off like that it was kind of like a setback, more or less. But I did come across Trio as soon as I transferred to USD, and Trio was actually coming back again. Like when I was there, I think because I commuted for like one semester, and I did not like it. I was like, I need to move up there because I just can't seem to focus. And as soon as I moved up there and I transferred, they had just started the Trio program, and I was like one of the first students that walked into their office. And again, I felt that warmth, that like welcoming, again, that I found at WIT, but instead in a big a 4-year college like USD. So actually my advisor, her name was Carly Ness. They helped me more or less switch over to my major, which is communication studies. So that was what I ended up graduating with, was I think it's a bachelor's of arts in communication studies.
That's cool. I feel like
Hmm.
it's such a journey, right? It's very trial and error. You start commuting,
Exactly.
and you realize that that's not what you need, and then you
Hmm.
move there, and then you kind of find a little community and trio success and that mentorship that we
Hmm.
all need, and that guidance to kind of make those decisions. And history is not easy. Whoever said history is easy is a big liar.
It's not.
It's not easy. Writing that Chicago format, getting that research done. I took this history class and I still remember she would always give me feedback saying, Victor, this is not a history essay. Like, because their format was so
Yeah.
strict. Yeah. So,
Very, very
anyways,
strict.
you learn by doing, right? And so now you're in a
Oh
master's
yeah.
program for English as a second language and you're kind of in the education realm still. But now it's more language
Yep.
specific. What made you decide to do a
Hmm.
major?
Well, I think because it's kind of interesting. Like I also was an ESL student at one point. Like, my parents, kind of going back to, my roots and stuff, like my parents didn't really want me to have to struggle, with just learning like and this is kind of unfortunate, but like my parents didn't want me to just learn like the dialect and then just struggle, and so they had to kind of, you know, give up that part, and they would have to more or less focus on teaching me Spanish in order to kind of get around and stuff. Um, I mean, I still understand and I can speak a little bit, but it's nothing like a fluent, language. But yeah, so going back to that, like they taught me Spanish, and then once we moved to Sioux City from Miami, I only knew like Spanish and then my a little bit of my parents' dialect. So um, from there, I pretty much went through like kindergarten. I think until fourth grade was when I graduated from ESL. So I think that, along with doing like a practicum at West High, I kind of saw a lot of students that had similar backgrounds to what I had growing up. So part of that, and I've always wanted to teach, so I kind of put those two together along with my undergrad, which is communication studies. Being able to speak to people. I think all of that kind of molded and helped me figure out what I wanted to do, which is ESL. And so why not give back to the community that gave so much to me, in Sioux City. So
Yeah, and honestly, it's true. I feel like ESL does have a lot of, immigrant children and first generation Iowans here. And I think that's really cool
mhm,
that you're motivated to, kind of give back with the skills that you have now, right?
exactly.
And I think a lot of
Mhm,
the things that you do now that you've studied really have given you skills to transfer into other areas. I know you're a
mhm,
CrossFit coach, and you
mhm,
also are working in coffee shops, and you're
mhm.
a latte artist, and I feel like you really built communities. Can you tell me a little bit about how your education has given you some skills to transfer to these other areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is definitely like talking to new people, meeting new faces, and making connections. Building that network was definitely something that I think I wasn't probably used to or wasn't comfortable with. But as soon as I started working in coffee, I started kind of breaking out of my shell, along with also working out at the same time. I've met a lot of people through the gym and then through coffee, and both are very similar in that you meet a lot of people and you kind of start to build relationships. And like, funny thing, like where you're sitting at right now, that was actually the first job that I got in coffee, when I was working at
Represent.
yep, Coffee
Coffee
Works. Yep.
works.
Yep. I actually was just about to graduate when I started working at Coffee Works. So I think I was there for about less than 2 years, and then from there I transferred to Vermilion. But yeah, like during that time I was still working out, and coffee was kind of became my big thing aside from school. So again, like just those networks, and all the way to going to compete in latte competitions, to judging big CrossFit events, like those kinds of things, just kind of helped me also shape me for who I am and stuff. And um, a lot of that just goes back to the education as well, like that, those speaking skills, those personal like skills, being able to meet people. And like I said, it probably all goes back to that education that I got. If it wasn't for that education, who knows if I would, be that out and about or that extroverted, so.
Yeah, and how do you feel? Because we've talked about this in the past, where your identities do become important in these spaces, right? Because these are predominantly
Yeah,
white spaces, the coffee world and
exactly.
the CrossFit world. Um, and what power do you have in bringing your identities into these spaces?
I think that just kind of goes back to like sharing my experience with people, and letting them know that like I'm not just any other barista or any other coach. Obviously, I was molded into who I am today because of my parents, because of my upbringing, because of my traditions and my the roots that my parents gave me, and I'm thankful for that. And so like if anything, I'm proud of who I am. And I love talking to my friends and colleagues about like my upbringing, and I think that definitely has kind of shaped me, and uh, it's allowed me to have a voice, in these places and these settings where maybe you don't see like a Latinx trainer or someone working in coffee. Granted, it might be a little bit different elsewhere, but especially here in Iowa, it's not really common. So it definitely gives me that empowerment, that gives me like a voice. And obviously I love talking to other coffee, connoisseurs or CrossFit coaches. And they definitely take, they understand it. They take more or less like they know that I'm not just any other guy, so.
And there's power in that representation and inclusion, because when I enter your classroom, for example, there's just almost
Uh-huh.
this like community aspect that kind of like increases. I feel like I do feel way
Mm-hmm.
comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
because we have that, I think, almost like that connection,
Exactly.
and even in coffee spaces, I bet you do bring a representation to like any Latinos or any indigenous folk that walk in,
Uh-huh.
and just like order from you. It's almost like the confianza. I don't know. And
Exactly.
it's kind of cool,
Right.
that power that you bring into that space. And I feel like even the
Definitely.
coffee roots that you've taught, you mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
about your
Mm-hmm.
grandpa that used to
Uh-huh.
work with coffee, right, in Guatemala.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad, or sorry, my grandpa and even my mom, like she would pick cherries, coffee cherries, and my
Mhm.
dad had they had like a little coffee plantation. It was actually a little bit outside of where we lived, so it was more or less like a rancho slash like
Mhm.
just it was like a finca,
Mhm.
a coffee farm, you could say. And
Mhm.
um, like that, they dabbed at it for a little bit, and I think it's still there, but the climate where we're at, especially
Mhm.
in that part of Guatemala, it's high altitude and it rains a lot and it gets cold. So it just really depends where you're at,
Mhm.
in terms of like the coffee. But yeah, they like, I mean, since I was a kid, my parents have been drinking coffee, and I actually used to hate coffee. I used to hate drinking it. I would not enjoy it, and so I actually didn't really like coffee until I was at WIT and I started enjoying it through like the little things, like through Burger King iced coffee and Starbucks, and everything, little those little details that kind of helped me, like, okay, maybe like I should try this out. And then I actually worked at a call center for 2 years, and I hated it, and I was looking for an outlet, and sure enough, Coffee Works gave me that opportunity.
Wow, that's really cool. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a really cool connection, I feel like. And so
Uh-huh.
you've done all these things and you have all these passions that you've kind of really like actualized, which is really cool. And these interests, especially a master's level in education, from, really proving to yourself that you can go that far in education. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I guess, what is your success philosophy? What does success mean to you?
I think success to me is overcoming those hardships and and kind of like anything that you have gone through, any kind of an adversity or hardships, and being able to overcome that, and seeing like the light at the end of the tunnel. Anything, and I mean, this can be like health problems, like if you had family problems, relationship wise, or if you had, let's just say if you maybe flunked out of school, and you decided to get back and tackle it again. Those kinds of things to me is definitely the true definition of success, being able to just overcome adversity.
Yeah, you have to overcome adversity to keep persisting, right? And keep
Exactly.
going and growing, honestly. And that's the biggest thing that you show and share, I feel like, with your
Hmm.
story is growth
Hmm.
mindset. Through effort, you can get things done. And I
Exactly.
guess to end our conversation with one more question, the theme question really is, what does being a Latinx or an indigenous Latinx Iowan mean to you?
Good question. I think the definition that I would say personally would be that if you have that, like, as a like a Latinx, first generation, I think it's very important to not be afraid to, you know, in a world where maybe everything is against you, the odds are against you. Like, it's, there's some beauty to what is considered like the struggle, and I think that if you can overcome all of that, you could definitely be, you could be a voice for others, and then that doesn't mean just in education. It could be other things like politics, being a business owner, or getting involved into the community and stuff. And I think, having that platform, gives you, gives you that advantage, and gives you that chance to succeed in life.
Being a voice and raising
Exactly.
those voices,
Hmm.
and I think that's true. It's a collaborative effort. It's a community effort. But
Exactly.
yeah, thank you so much, Cristobal. I really appreciate you
Yeah,
sharing your wisdom with my students, and I know they're going to take
of
so
course.
much away from this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you.